8 years ago, I broke up with my ex, Adu, shortly after our twins were born. We had been together for just about 14 months when she found out she was pregnant. Both of us panicked, and in an effort to make it work for the kids, we decided to give our relationship a try. However, we quickly realized that we weren't compatible, despite some good moments. Ultimately, we decided to split up amicably when she met someone new, and we settled into a co-parenting routine for our twins. Our co-parenting arrangement worked well. We communicated primarily about the kids, split time evenly, and shared expenses without any formal child support. 2 years later, Adu met her now husband, who had a daughter the same age as our twins. While I supported her desire for a blended family, things began to shift when Adu suggested that I treat her stepdaughter like my own. At first, it seemed harmless, but it soon escalated to Adu expecting me to include her stepdaughter in every outing with my kids. I didn't mind occasionally bringing her along, but soon it became an expectation. I felt that I was being asked to be a third parent to her stepdaughter, which wasn't fair to me or my twins. Over time, it seemed like every special plan I made for my twins turned into a situation where I had to consider her stepdaughter's feelings. I even faced criticism when I didn't spend as much on gifts for her stepdaughter as I did for our twins. I knew I had to set boundaries, so I made it clear that my focus was on my twins. While this didn't sit well with Adu, we managed to maintain a civil co-parenting relationship. As time went on, Ado's household expanded further. She and her husband had a baby, and they also took in her husband's nephew. Now, my twins had not just their stepsister and half-sister, but also a step-cousin to deal with. Adu was committed to keeping everyone together as one big family, while I continued to assert that my responsibility was solely to my kids. Things became increasingly complicated when a school trip came up. My twins' school had a small, mixed-age class, which meant they were in the same class as their stepsister and step-cousin. The school planned a pricey trip to an interactive museum that the kids were excited about, and I decided to pay for my twins to go. When I informed Adu, I assumed she would be pleased. Instead, she insisted that it wasn't fair for my twins to go if the other kids couldn't join. At first, I thought she was joking, but she was serious. I told her that I was only responsible for my twins, suggesting that she and her husband could fundraise or save for the other kids if the trip was that important to them. However, Adu argued that it wouldn't be right for our kids to go on this trip while her other kids stayed behind. Her husband chimed in, claiming it was unfair to treat the children differently. I tried to stay calm, but I was baffled. I asked why it was my job to pay for all the kids under her roof. Their responses made me feel guilty for wanting to give my twins a memorable experience. Adu and her husband implied that I would be damaging the kids' relationships if I didn't cover the expenses for everyone. I was frustrated. This wasn't about family unity. It was about them wanting to push their financial burdens onto me. I pointed out that Adu had made the decision to expand her family and that it was her responsibility to manage those choices. The tension escalated, and I felt overwhelmed. I reminded them that I was just trying to create a nice experience for my twins and that expecting me to cover the costs for all the kids was unreasonable. Adu insisted that if my twins went while the others stayed behind, they would feel like they were being treated as less than, and I should care about that. At that point, I felt like I was being dragged into a situation that wasn't fair to me. I didn't want to be the bad guy in this scenario, but I wasn't going to take on the financial responsibilities for children who weren't mine. I realized that I needed to stand firm on my boundaries. I was their dad, not a caretaker for Ado's extended family. In the end, I told Adu that I wouldn't be guilt-tripped into paying for her kids, and that if she wanted everyone to be treated equally, they should find a way to cover the costs themselves. I understood that no child wants to feel left out, but I also had to prioritize my own children's experiences. As I walked away from the conversation, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. It was clear to me that while I would continue to be a dedicated father to my twins, I couldn't let Ato's expectations dictate my role in her expanding family. After an exhausting argument over a school trip, I thought I had made my stance clear. I wouldn't pay for Ato's other children. It was frustrating because all I wanted was to give my twins a fun experience without it spiraling into family drama. But instead of dropping the issue, Adu and her husband continued to pressure me, and the situation only escalated. A few days later, Adu reached out and asked to meet. I knew it wouldn't be a friendly chat, but I agreed, hoping to resolve things. We met at a diner, and as soon as she sat down, I could tell she had rehearsed what she wanted to say. She insisted I wasn't understanding the situation, implying I needed to see the bigger picture. Adu argued that this trip wasn't just about a school outing, it was about establishing a standard for how we would handle family matters moving forward. I was stunned when she suggested that I should pay for her kids in the future, including family vacations. I tried to remain calm, but felt my irritation rising. She continued to push the fairness argument, claiming that if my kids got to do things while the others didn't, it would create resentment and damage their relationships. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't responsible for her children's experiences. I reminded her that we had been doing parallel parenting and that it was her responsibility to manage her kids. Adu then took it a step further, saying if I cared about the kids' well-being, I would want to support the entire family, not just my twins. It felt absurd. I was there to support my children, not take on a financial burden for kids that weren't mine. The conversation heated up, and Ato's husband unexpectedly showed up, joining in on the pressure. He asserted that my actions were dividing the family and that I was being unfair. I told him that I was only focusing on my twins. It felt like they were ganging up on me, trying to paint me as the villain. Frustrated, I said I wouldn't let them guilt me into paying for kids I wasn't responsible for. When Adu argued that I was creating division, I countered that they needed to handle their family dynamics without putting that on me. The tension in the diner grew, and I felt people staring. I stood up and stated my position one last time. My priority was my twins, and I wasn't changing that. I left feeling a mix of frustration and relief, knowing I had set boundaries. Unfortunately, my relief was short-lived. Days later, I received a barrage of messages from Ato's family, starting with her sister. She usually stayed out of our issues, but now she was texting about how important it was for the kids to feel like one family. The messages turned accusatory, labeling me as selfish for not supporting her sister's children. I tried to ignore them, hoping they would fade, but the pressure mounted. Then Ato's mother called. I hadn't spoken to her in a while and expected a calm discussion about the twins, but she immediately launched into a rant about how I needed to pay for all the kids. She insisted that I should think of the bigger picture and how it would be better if I were more involved. I felt my patience slipping as I reiterated that those kids weren't my responsibility. She accused me of not being a good father and insisted I was creating suffering among the kids. I was floored by her assumptions. I tried to explain that wanting the best for my twins didn't mean I had to support every child in Ato's household financially. It felt like she was twisting my desire to care for my own into a guilt trip. After repeatedly trying to reason with her, I realized we were getting nowhere, and I ended the conversation politely. But the pressure didn't stop there. Over the next week, it felt like Ato's family was rallying against me, reinforcing the narrative that I was the villain for wanting to maintain boundaries. Every interaction left me feeling more isolated and frustrated. All I had wanted was to create a positive experience for my twins, but instead, It had turned into a family drama that painted me as the bad guy. I just wanted to be a good parent to my kids without being dragged into the complexities of Ato's family situation. As I continued to navigate these tense interactions, I realized that setting boundaries was crucial for my own well-being and for my kids. I had to remind myself that it was okay to prioritize my twins and that I wasn't responsible for making Ato's children feel included at my expense. This situation highlighted the importance of maintaining my boundaries and recognizing that family dynamics can be complicated, but should never force anyone to compromise their principles. Ultimately, I decided to stay focused on my own children and their happiness. I hoped that Adu and her family would eventually come to understand my perspective, but I wasn't about to sacrifice my financial stability or emotional health to fit into their vision of family unity. Adio's brother left a snarky comment on one of my social media posts about being a dad. He wrote, "Real dads support their families no matter what." I knew he wasn't just talking about my kids. I didn't respond, I deleted it and moved on, but it bothered me. I'm doing my best for my twins, yet somehow I'm the bad guy in their eyes. One day, I dropped my kids off at Ato's house. As I was heading back to my car, her husband caught up with me. He didn't say hello, he jumped right in with, "You know you're hurting the kids with this." I was shocked. I thought we had talked about this, but clearly he was still upset. He started saying that my decision not to pay for all the kids was causing problems between the siblings, and that I needed to think about the family. I told him, "I'm not hurting anyone. I'm taking care of my kids. They're not the ones struggling." But he kept saying how everyone thought I was being unfair and how soon the kids would notice and start resenting each other. It felt like he was putting all the family's happiness on my shoulders, and I wasn't having it. I said, "Your family's opinion doesn't change my responsibilities. I'm here for my kids, and that won't change." Honestly, I didn't know what else to say. No matter what I did, they were going to see me as the villain in their family story. That night, I sat there trying to figure out how it had come to this. All I wanted was to take care of my kids and give them good experiences. Yet I was seen as someone who didn't care about family. I ended up venting to a couple of close friends. They were shocked at the pressure Ato's family was putting on me. One friend joked that if they were so worried about the kids missing out, they could pitch in and fund the trip themselves. It made me laugh, but it was also frustrating. It felt like Ato's whole family thought I was obligated to be a full-on parent to kids who weren't mine, just to keep the peace with people who didn't respect my boundaries. I was getting texts and calls from various family members, all pushing the same idea. It felt like they believed I owed them something and wouldn't stop until I gave in. By the end of that week, I realized trying to reason with them was pointless. They weren't looking for an explanation, they wanted me to conform. I told myself I wouldn't let them wear me down. My kids are my responsibility, and I wouldn't let their guilt trip change that. It's crazy to think all this started from me just trying to pay for my kids' school trip, but it had turned into a fight over who was doing enough for the whole family. They might not like it, but I know where I stand. After a week of non-stop messages and guilt trips from Ato's family, I decided to set clear boundaries. I needed to be firm about what I was willing to do for my kids and not give in to their demands. First, I talked to my twins about the upcoming trip. I wanted to ensure they were still excited and didn't feel awkward because of all the drama. I kept it simple, saying, "I'm really looking forward to this trip for you guys, and I want you to know that this is something special for just the two of you." I didn't go into the messy details, but I wanted them to know it was okay for them to enjoy something just for themselves. They seemed relieved and excited, which was a huge weight off my shoulders. I needed them to feel that they deserved nice experiences without feeling responsible for anyone else. With that settled, I knew I had to set clear boundaries with Adu and her family. I called her and kept it calm because I didn't want another long argument. I said, "My role as a parent is to support my twins. I'm here for them and doing my best to give them good experiences. But that doesn't extend to other children who aren't mine. My financial responsibility ends with my twins." Of course, Adu wasn't happy. She started talking about how the other kids would feel and how it wasn't fair for siblings to have different experiences. I let her talk, but when she started with the guilt trip again, I stopped her. I said, "I understand how you feel, but this is my final decision. I'm not paying for any extra expenses outside of my twins." I told her if she wanted to work something out for her household, that was up to her, but she needed to stop pressuring me. There was a pause, and I could tell she was upset, but it wasn't going to change my mind. I could feel her getting ready for one last pitch, but she must have realized it wasn't going anywhere. She ended up saying something like, "Fine, I guess you've made your choice," in a tone that was meant to make me feel bad, but I didn't. I felt relieved. I was done explaining myself. After that, things got quieter. No more random messages from her family, no more passive-aggressive comments, just silence. It was a bit awkward, but it felt good to have some peace. I think they finally realized I wasn't going to give in to their demands. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I made sure to spend extra time with my twins doing regular things, like going to the park or watching movies. I wanted them to feel secure and happy, away from the adult issues. It was refreshing to focus on them without any extra drama. Finally, the day of the trip arrived. I dropped them off at school, and they were all smiles, ready to go. It was wonderful to see them excited after everything that had happened. As they ran off to join their friends, I felt a real sense of satisfaction. It's not about making everyone happy, it's about giving my kids the best I can and teaching them to set boundaries. But here's the twist. The day after the trip, I got a call from Adu. I expected a snarky comment or a dig, but instead, she just asked if the kids had fun. I told her they did and kept it short because I didn't want to start old arguments. Then she surprised me. She thanked me for standing up for myself and my kids. She said, "I don't agree with you, but I respect that you stood up for what you believe in." I was shocked. I didn't expect her to come around, but there it was. It wasn't an apology, but it felt like an acknowledgement that maybe I wasn't the villain they made me out to be. Since then, things have been more peaceful. I don't hear from her family, and we seem to have reached a new understanding. We might not agree on everything, but we've accepted our roles in the kids' lives. This situation has made me a better dad because I'm not constantly second-guessing my decisions. I'm just focusing on what's best for my twins. I've learned that sometimes setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others, it's about saying yes to my own peace of mind. It's okay to prioritize my family without feeling guilty about it. If others don't get it, that's on them. A few weeks later, after things had settled down, I thought I was done with the demands. Then Adu hit me up with something new. She started talking about the twins' living situation at her place and how they didn't have the same comforts as they do with me. At first, I thought she was just venting, but then she hinted that I should do something about it. It turned out she wanted me to buy a house not for me, but for them. She said it wasn't fair for the kids to go back and forth between two totally different living standards, and that it could hurt their self-esteem if they felt like they were lacking at her place. I couldn't believe it. She actually expected me to buy a second house for the kids to stay in when they were with her. I tried to stay calm and asked, "How does that make any sense? You already have a home." She went off about how their house was too small for her family and how it was affecting the kids' mental well-being. She talked about equal standards, like I was supposed to make up for every choice she made since we split up. When I told her that wasn't going to happen, she pulled out every guilt trip in the book. She said, "Don't you want the kids to feel comfortable at my place?" And how it was unfair. I wasn't willing to provide for their full living experience. It was like she was calling me a cold-hearted jerk for not wanting to buy her family a new house. I told her, "The twins have everything they need at your place. If you think they need a bigger house, that's something you and your husband can handle. I'm not responsible for upgrading your home." She was quiet for a second, then snapped back, "Well, if the kids feel like they have a real home only with you, that will be on you." I shook my head, and that was the moment I knew this would be the last time I let her get to me. I said, "This is your family. If you want a bigger house, that's for you to figure out. You can't put that pressure on me." In the end, we hung up after that. I felt good for standing firm, but deep down, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. I reminded myself I had to do what's best for my twins, not what everyone else thought was best for them. I knew this wouldn't be the last of the demands, but this time, I felt different. I had already set my boundaries, and I wasn't about to let Ado's family make me feel guilty for focusing on my own kids. It's tough navigating these relationships, but I've learned I can prioritize my family without sacrificing myself. That's what being a real dad means.